Hi, welcome to Soft Network. If you're new here, I'm Chris Ostrander, the host of Soft Network. I'm a full-time professor and licensed clinical counselor by day, and I will pour my heart and soul into this nonprofit on the side. If you're new here again, please like, comment, but specifically subscribe. Doesn't help me. Ultimately, it just helps the organization, Soft Network, and pushes out the videos that we produce to more people and gets the channel more visibility. Okay. We started this podcast less than a year ago, and this has been one of the very first projects that's been on my mind. Is I wanted to get down and have a discussion with several individuals within this arena, specifically on psychedelics. And so a quick recap might be helpful around the idea of psychedelics, but also a little bit of my own experience. So back in 2018, I was working with an individual coming out of the soft community, and he brought this novel treatment to me. And at first I was reluctant, not really sure, like, what are you talking about? This seems a little crazy. Is this safe? Is it not safe? And so he was steadfast on his rationale in going, and also the anecdotal feedback he was getting from some of the individuals that he previously worked with that were supporting this. And so he was going. And so very, very quickly, I looked at what type of risk mitigation we could do, what type of therapy we could use on the back end, and then he launched. And so ever since then, I've kind of been on this process, both as a professor, but also as a clinician, trying to gather as much information about this process and this ecosystem, so that I could help inform my students, inform my clients, keep them safe, and at the same time, kind of figure out what's best for them along the way for individuals that decided to go do this. And so this discussion really is focused primarily on individuals working with clients. Although we do the first interview that I do, you guys are going to see a provider who actually was a client, which is pretty powerful. And so the history of psychedelics, obviously it's been illegal in the United States for several years, but with the special operations community finding so much anecdotal evidence of treatment and the efficacy of this treatment, there's been this huge, almost tidal wave of positivity that you've seen probably on social media, stories, clients, where it's just, it's the latest and greatest thing. It's the best, it's the best, it's the best. And conceptually, I've understood these programs and individuals have had to push so hard to almost crest the wall, if you will, the gatekeeping wall of society, but also the legalities. And to their credit, then they've been able to get really important stakeholders on the legislative side, both nationally and locally to state levels, to start looking at psychedelics as a real possibility for an evidence-based treatment. For this mini series, we've brought in several providers to discuss their experience, how they started, where they started, some of the good, some of the bad, some of the ugly, hence the title of the series. What are the things that we as clinicians need to know when a client comes and asks or says, hey, I'm really interested in psychedelics? What are the screeners that we need to do as clinicians? What doctors, medical doctors, we should be looking to work with and partner with in this space to help prepare them medically and get screened medically to see if they're healthy enough to go do this. And then also setting up ethical collaboration with coaches. Oftentimes treatment facilities have coaches that work with them in country, because many of these facilities are outside of the United States because of legalities. And so this creates a little bit of an ethical loophole where we've got to close that. And as clinicians, we are trying to work with the coaches that are starting to work with our clients that then go to the treatment facilities, they experience the treatment, and then they come back to us. And so what therapy approaches work best? We're as clinicians stuck in this time and space where the research is just looking at, does this medicine work? And yet we've got so many questions of, well, if it does work or if it partially works, which therapy modality works well with it? Which therapy modality potentially stunts growth? Is there a different therapy modality that needs to be used on maybe childhood sexual trauma versus military combat trauma? And the questions go on and on and on. Many of you that are not new to the space have maybe heard some of the discussions about there being a spiritual element to people's faith journey, specifically as it is tied to psychedelics. I've had clients that were very atheistic or agnostic and then go and have a faith restarted or a new faith started. And so there's a spiritual element, and we get into the ethics of spirituality, which I think is really, really important, both from an ethical standpoint, but also just a human standpoint. So many questions to ask. And so I thought through, even though we've already started interviewing, and I wanted to bring you all a really interesting interview right out of the gate. Something that maybe some of you have heard of, but many of you probably aren't even aware of. And the interview is of one of our providers who happens to work in this space, but then decided to go on her own treatment for a physiological injury. And I won't spoil the story, but for those of you that have not heard, there are anecdotal reports of individuals with physiological barriers or wounds, and through their treatment via psychedelics, they're finding physiological healing. And so that first interview I'm going to bring to you guys next. I can't wait for this series to get out. I know it's going to probably create more questions than maybe answer, but that's the point. I want to get this conversation going, and I want to have a discussion of obviously the good, and many of that's been discussed in the podcast space and on social media, which is great. I want to talk about the bad, and I definitely want to talk about the ugly, because as a clinician, we've got to be aware of the risk, and we've got to fully educate our clients. And then as an educator myself, educating my young students on some of the risks when it comes to this new treatment modality. And so super excited. Thank you for coming along again. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, throw out questions, comments in the comment section. We want to make this as interactive as possible. And thank you again for coming along the journey with us. Yeah, I was getting ready and I was like, man, if there's ever a time to wear this shirt,
it's now.
It's now. We're going to hit the Psychedelics series and make sure we keep kids off drugs.
Yep.
Get others on drugs. So
for the right reasons, apparently.
For the right reasons. Correct. Yeah. Welcome to Soft Network. Today we got an amazing guest, Stacy Rush. Stacy is a licensed mental health counselor. She's also a doctoral candidate in counselor education and supervision, and founder of Trauma Solutions Counseling in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Her work focuses on trauma recovery, identity development, and integrative approaches to mental health that connect mind, body, and meaning. Stacy specializes in working with veterans, high performers, and individuals navigating complex trauma and major life transitions. Her clinical work integrates trauma-informed therapies, somatic approaches, and psychedelic-assisted preparation and integration. Alongside her clinical work, she is pursuing doctoral research on identity reconstruction and meaning-making among special operation veterans who face adverse childhood experiences. Stacy is dedicated to broadening the discussion about healing, resilience, and human capacity for transformation. Stacy, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Absolutely. Obviously, you and I know each other a good bit, but for those that don't know, Stacy is one of our providers at Soft Network. A lot of our individuals that come on are from outside of the network, but this is cool to have another clinician come in. I know we had Adrian come in, and so a lot more collegial and laid back discussion. But you were an integral piece in the psychedelic mini series. So I don't know. I think yours is going to come out second. Lindsay's going to come out first, and then we've got a medical doctor, a coach, and a couple other people. But anyways, yeah, you're sandwiched in here. And so part of the reason I wanted to bring you on is, one, you're a clinician that works in this space. And then two, personally, having a connection, and we'll talk about that, but wanted to get your story out, but also, I hadn't talked to you since December, wanted to pick your brain on everything that you went through. So I'm excited about this.
I'm excited too. I'm excited to share.
Cool. Yeah. Why don't you give us a backstory? I don't even know this. Where'd you grow up, and how'd you end up joining the military?
So I grew up in a small town called Greenville, Michigan. Okay. It is about 30 minutes north of Grand Rapids, which is a bigger town that most people know about. Kind of a rough childhood. I say not bad, but we all normalize our childhoods. I could mark every adverse childhood experience off on the checklist. So it was not the best, but also not the worst childhood. I think I have a younger brother too, and we took very different paths as kids. And that always interested me. I was always like, how are we so different? But we're growing in the same environment. And so, even as a kid, I always had that question in my mind. And I graduated high school, went to community college, and quickly realized that I did not want to stay in my home environment, my hometown. And so I had researched and I applied to numerous jobs. I was going to school for criminal justice. No one would take me on. They're like, you need experience. And so I was like, okay, well, how do I get experience? If no one will take me, how do I get there? And just one day I was actually working at Nextel. I don't know if you remember the old.
Yeah, that was my first cell phone. Yeah. The Chirp.
Yeah, the Chirp.
The Nextel Chirp.
I know, right? I'm aging us, Chris, but
that was 20 years ago.
It's so crazy.
No, more.
I know. So I was working there, and I was like, well, this isn't my experience. So I just started Googling criminal justice, how do I get law enforcement experience? And the Coast Guard popped up, and I don't even think I knew that it was part of the military. And we even have Coast Guard, birth town, I think is what they call it. That's terrible that I don't know for sure, but it's in Grand Haven, Michigan, which is about an hour away. And I just had never heard of it before, but I searched it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. It will get me out of here. Then great. So it was very much like an escape from my hometown. I knew that staying there would not be good for me. And I was gone within a month and a half. Wow. Joined the Coast Guard and left.
What was the recruiter experience like? You were just like, I want to join the Coast Guard. And they're like, sure, right here.
I mean, pretty much. Yeah. I went there. Lansing is about an hour away. That's where my recruiting was.
Are you a Michigan State fan, by the way?
No, I don't watch sports. I'm not.
Oh, thank the Lord. No, that's fine. My parents are from the Detroit area, and my aunt lives in Ann Arbor, so we're huge Michigan fans. But whenever I meet somebody in the area, I always gotta sniff them out.
Ask them, yeah. But no, I went there one day and then came back to do ASFAB. I did not do well on ASFAB. I had really bad test anxiety, as a kid, actually up until I got my license for counseling. Really, I did not do good. I actually even had to do an appeal for the rating that I wanted to do in the Coast Guard. I had to ask permission. But took my ASFAB, and then I think it was 2 weeks later, I was on the road to Cape May, New Jersey.
Wow. Does everybody go because I know some of the different branches, but for Coast Guard, does everybody go to Cape May, or is it is there an East Coast, West Coast split?
No, everyone does. Basic is in Cape May.
Okay, cool. Yeah. What was that experience like? And time frame, this is the aughts?
The what?
Sorry, the aughts, 06, 07, 08, somewhere in there?
Oh, yeah. So I joined in 05. Okay. Yeah, 2005. So the Okay, so my experience at boot camp is so interesting. The first day was hard. I had never been away from home. That night I was like, oh gosh, like, I don't know if I can do this kind of thing. Um, but I was like, if I don't do this, where do I go back to my hometown, and that's not what I want. So
Mm.
like that really played a part in me staying. But as I kind of got used to it, I was like, this is kind of nice. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but for the first time in my life, I didn't have to make decisions. Like,
Mm.
I just had to do what I was told to do, and I was golden. Just kind of blend in, although I didn't blend in because I was like the only person that knew how to do what they were told to do. So I stood out in that way, but I was like, all I have to do is do what they tell me to do. I don't have to think about anything. I don't have to worry about anything. And that part was so nice to me.
Being that, well, my brain's going in a couple different ways. My first question, let me focus. First question would be, was nobody studied up? So did you study and you kind of knew some of the jargon as well as like things that they quiz you on in boot camp, or?
No, I didn't. And I still to this day, I have such a hard time with terms. Like, I know
Okay.
context, but like terms are hard for me. So I did struggle in that space all throughout boot camp. And like, if a company commander would stop me and like ask me something, it was like deer in the headlights. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know,
Where was the Coast Guard founded?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, no, that part I did not know. I worked out a lot as like a teenager and a young adult. I don't anymore, but whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was very physically fit. So that part was not hard for me at all. I would say the hardest part for me was just being stopped and asked something on the spot. But even the classwork, Coast Guard is like considered one of the hardest for like their coursework.
Mm-hmm.
And I did pretty well. I can do pretty well in that stuff very naturally. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, that wasn't hard.
Where'd you end up doing A school? And what was the MOS that you ended up in?
So in the Coast Guard, you don't have to pick one first.
Okay.
You go to basic, and then you can go to your first unit. And they've changed things since then a little bit, but you still have that option now. As far as I know, I retired last year, so last year you still had that option. But so I went back to my first unit. I actually did request to stay within District 9, which is like Michigan area.
Okay.
There's a couple other states too. I ended up going back to Port Huron, Michigan. I didn't even know that was a town in Michigan. But it's like on the other side of Michigan that I was from. I remember they told me, I was like, where in the heck is Port Huron, Michigan? I had no clue. And then when you're there, you can kind of get like on the job experiences of all the different rates.
Okay.
So I was at a small boat station. I thought I wanted to be a boatswain mate, which is like basically driving the boats and stuff. Put my name on the list. You could also do what they call striking, which is like just on the job experience. And then you take a test and then you're that rate. So I was striking and had my name on the A school list to go to BM school. And I failed. It was like the third time I took the BM test. There was my test anxiety again and failed it. And then I remembered looking around at everyone at my unit. It's very bosun mate heavy. And I was like, all they do is babysit and drive boats. And I was like, is that really what I want to do? And I said no. And so I took my name off the list and then decided I liked helping people. And one of the jobs where you help people is like in pay and personnel and admin. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to take that job. And of course, when you're at a unit that's a small boat station, you get ridiculed for taking that kind of a job. So I got made fun of so much. You could also, so they had distance learning, which was not striking. It was a little bit different. It was kind of like an online course. Or you could go to A school, and I did the distance learning. So I never actually had to go to an A school. I did distance learning, passed that, and then went to my first unit as a yeoman.
Okay, cool. Would you like once you got settled in and that's what you were doing? for those that didn't join the Coast Guard, I mean, what's your day-to-day like? What was your experience like?
Yeah, the day-to-day is actually great. I say like yeoman or any support job is great if you want to eventually have a family and you want to stay in and have a family. So yeomans they do have some like underway, like on cutters positions. I actually did my entire 20 years never getting on a boat.
Wow.
Yeah, and it is kind of unheard of because once
Yeah.
you get hired, you get put on like a sea duty candidate list. And then your picks are kind of lessened because you haven't done that yet. Um, but yeah, so it's very like 9 to 5 kind of office job. With the exception of like if your unit has duty, then you would stand like a watch standing duty. But very just kind of civilian type, but in the military position.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're still in Michigan. Take us through kind of the next few years, and then what was your interest in pursuing obviously grad school?
Yeah. So I went to the Federal Law Enforcement Academy for one of the qualifications at the small boat station, and it's a 2-week course, and that was actually where I met my husband.
Cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually hate to tell that story. I used to hate to tell that story because I felt like it made me look like bad. But we met as friends. Like he was dating someone. I was just coming out of a bad relationship. And we just kind of stayed in touch. He was actually stationed in Chicago area.
Okay.
So we were about 4 hours away from each other. And then my mom's house was like dead center in the middle for both of us. So we just kind of stayed in touch and would meet like on the weekends. Like 6 months later, we started meeting up and hanging out. And then within actually a year, we got married.
Nice.
And that was right at the time that I had finished my my distance learning program. And so once you like make rate, so I was a YN3, a third class petty officer yeoman. You transfer out because my billet was a non-rated billet at the small boat station. So I transferred to Houston, and my husband was actually going to A school in California at the same time that I was due to transfer. Well, I would say give or take like 3 months, but around the same time. And so so we got married actually as he was en route to his A school. And even as a yeoman, we tell people, don't do that because it messes up all of your entitlements. But here I was, and I did the thing that people don't do or aren't supposed to do. As the yeoman who's supposed to tell people not to do that. But yeah, we did that. And then it was interesting because the Coast Guard did not send him to Houston. They actually sent him to St. Louis, Missouri for his job. And that was really hard for me. We're newly married, and we knew like getting married that we would have that difficulty, or that it was a potential difficulty. But they just really didn't work with us at all. And thankfully I had a commander in Houston that was so helpful and pulled some strings. And there was another girl who wanted to transfer out to be with her husband. We did like this whole like 3-way billet exchange. It took a long time, but finally, like 6 months later, we were stationed together in St. Louis. So that would have been like 2009 that we finally got, well, I think it was a little before that, probably 2007 or 8, that we finally got stationed back together. And we were lucky enough to be stationed together the rest of our careers.
Wow.
And neither of us had to go on one of the ships. We call them cutters in the Coast Guard, but one of the cutters throughout our entire marriage. So that was also such a wonderful blessing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like God was like, okay, I made it really hard for you in the beginning, and I'm just going to kind of make it a little bit easier for you the rest of the way. And then, a couple transfers later, I was I'll never forget it. I was actually sitting at my desk one day and seeing people retire. When you work in support, there's a lot of higher ranking individuals in those buildings. And I'm seeing people retire and come back, like as civilians. And it just kind of piqued interest in me. Like, why are they doing that? Like, I can't wait to get out of this. That was how I was feeling.
When you say come back in the sense of like just shoot the breeze, or come back in some sort of occupation capacity?
Yeah, in their occupation. So they would like leave and come back as civilians to the same unit that they were active duty in. And it just, it made me curious. So I was like, why are they doing that? Like, what is going on? I don't want to come back to this. Like, I want something different for myself. And at that time, I was also like a pretty high performer, like doing all the things, doing as much as I could, getting like enlisted person of the year for my units. I think I had that like 4 or 5 times throughout my career.
Nice. All the gold stars.
Yeah, but like, why? Like that's what I eventually came to, like, why am I doing this? Like, what is going on? And I mean, we all like to be good people and to perform well, but I was realizing that I was like working so hard for something that later on would not matter. And I really felt that. And what I was seeing in people is that, like, as they left their military careers, they didn't have anything else. And so at least that's how I perceived it. And so they would come back into a civilian role in the same place. And I just knew I didn't want to do that. And so that's when I started, I guess I should back up a little bit. That entire time before that, I was working on my degree. Because I went to college before I joined the Coast Guard, I just never finished. So I did finish. I shifted from criminal justice to psychology, ended up getting my bachelor's in psychology. And then now we're in this position where I'm like, I don't want to stay in this forever, but what do I do? So I started looking up colleges for, initially social work was where I wanted to be. And then I think back then it was like harder to find an online social work degree than it was to find a mental health counselor degree. I stumbled across Colorado Christian University, where I got my master's degree from, and was like, you know what, why not? Like, if this is something that God wants me to do, like, I'll get accepted. And I had a really bad GPA in my my bachelor's degree, because it just wasn't really something I wanted to do. It was just something that I felt like I had to do.
Yeah.
And so I applied, and they let me in on like provisions because my GPA was not so great. And then, so as I was going through the Coast Guard, I also finished my master's degree and got fully licensed by, let's see, when did I get fully licensed? I think 2019 or 2018 was when I got fully licensed.
No, I'm with you. Mine was coming out of high school and undergrad. Undergrad wasn't too great. I was more focused on playing basketball than grades. The last year, I was like, ooh, I better need to pick up the grades if I want to go to grad school. But yeah, coming out of high school, I'm surprised they even allowed me to graduate. I was not focused on school at all. Side note, for anybody that's watching, because I know people watch to pick up different tidbits and whatnot, I get asked this question a lot. You don't have to have a psych undergrad to go into whether it's a master's in social work. I shouldn't speak on social work. I'm not 100% sure that's the case, but if you end up going after like licensed marriage and family therapy or counseling, you can have all sorts of different backgrounds as far as your undergrad. It could be, international defense or geopolitics or whatever, really. The one thing that I tell people and students in particular they're thinking about coming is, if you do have a psych undergrad, it just gives you the vocabulary and a little bit of the framework, but you don't have to have those as prerequisites. Sometimes for our pipeline program, I get those questions pretty regularly of, well, do I need to go back and get another undergrad degree? It's no.
Yeah.
On that note, do you feel like, I don't know how much, I think you said it was, what was it? Criminology or
Criminal justice.
Criminal justice. Yeah, I knew I was saying that wrong. Any of that, do you feel like was helpful down the road?
So honestly, I can't remember anything I learned in college. I learned a lot from my childhood.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of mine was just so experience based. That was what I was comfortable in. That's what I knew.
Right.
Like, and even in my criminal justice degree, like it just came very naturally to me, probably because of my childhood.
Yeah. No, I see that. And that was a little bit of my experience as well. But working with grad students on the regular, it's interesting. There is almost like a split. There's students that clearly have a unique background and experience, and they're using that experience almost as the foundation of understanding dynamics of what's happening in the counseling room, therapeutic room. And then there's students that maybe had more of a, uh, laid back childhood, warm childhood, however you want to describe it. And their knowledge is more seeped in that academic. And it's interesting to watch them develop and rely on both, because both can become really good clinicians. But the information that they're relying on, I generally see some of those individuals that have I'll just say a more traumatic childhood, or strong negative impacts in their childhood. If they've worked through them, they tend to excel really quickly, especially in their practicum internship, once they're actually doing the job, as opposed to those that have I'll say strictly book knowledge. But that's interesting that you were aware of that. Okay, so what was your experience at Colorado Christian? I've met a couple of graduates, but never dove into what their experience was like. And yours was completely remote, right?
Yeah, well, except for in the summer, you have to meet in person for 5 days. I think
Oh,
it was
okay.
5 days. It might it might be different now, but back then I think it was 5 days. But my experience there was amazing. I loved it. I looked back at the end and I was like, man, I don't think I could have done another master's program where I wasn't developing myself and my relationship with God along the way. And it really got me closer to God. It also helped me understand myself and my own triggers and my own, I guess, protectors is what I call them, like growing up. And I really think that has helped impact my work and what I do now.
Is there a particular, sometimes going through undergrad, grad, whatever, there's a particular faculty or a couple of faculty that really impacted you clinically, but also, personally, academically, because you're sitting underneath them and learn from them? But is there a particular professor that, had that impact for you?
It's interesting because I did not have her as a professor, but I saw her during our practicums in person seats. And what's so cool is now I'm in my PhD program there, and I actually was assistant in her class. So it was really, really kind of neat how that all played out. But what I looked at her and loved about her is her authenticity. And even I hate terms, but I would identify myself as kind of like a neurodivergent kind of person. And I saw her and immediately knew that she was that type of way too, and that she was owning it. And for me, that was so important and just life changing to see oh, I could be that someday if I want to, if that's what I choose, and if that's the path God wants me to walk on, even though my brain works very differently.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Really important, especially in a field like psychology. And I'll blanket umbrella social work and counseling all under that psychology. I can't tell you, myself included, but also just looking at culture, it's like the idea of a psychologist or a counselor is like this very detached individual. At least this is my perception. And they're, very clinical. They're not, engaged in you. It's more about assessment. It's more about analyzing, diagnosing, less personal. And obviously, once you get in the field, you realize, okay, there's a spectrum here. Like, yes, there are those individuals, but yeah, to your point, when you're coming up and you see somebody that you can identify with and relate to, and you're like, oh, you're doing the thing that I think I'm going to do. Like, I can be that. That's a huge help.
Yeah, it was so powerful. Her name's Dr. Taylor. So
Nice.
Rebecca Taylor, she lives in Colorado now. She was actually one of the, I think one of the first, don't quote me on that, to be trained by Dick Swartz for IFS.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
How'd she get in so early on that? I'm curious. Do you know?
I don't know the story behind it. I know she was in Tennessee at the time. I'm not sure if there was like some type of like knowing of the same people or something like that. I feel
Okay.
like I vaguely remember her describing something along those lines.
Okay. Okay, so you get done grad school, you're still in the military. Um, what did it look like? So obviously you do practicum internship. What'd you do just while you were in? Was it like a church or a counseling agency, local, or how'd that work out?
Yeah, I did in-home counseling.
Oh, okay.
So it was a lot. I do not recommend that for
No.
anyone. I was working like 60 plus hour weeks because I was doing my Coast Guard stuff and then at night doing the in-home counseling. I learned a lot in in-home. Like I would recommend in-home to new clinicians, like up and coming clinicians or college students or grad students, I guess, just because you learn so much. So that was amazing, but it took a lot of my time.
Mm.
I did that all through my practicum, my internship, and then I think a year after, I still was doing in-home. And then I found a private practice site close to home and decided to shift into private practice as I was gaining my licensure hours.
Okay.
But yeah, again, like thank God for my husband during that time because we had three little boys. Like actually my youngest was born in my master's degree program.
Holy cow.
So yeah, it was crazy, chaotic mess all the time. And I'm so thankful for him and also just the process that God put us in that time to be able to get through that. But and it was wonderful to be on the back end and already be licensed by the time I retired from the military. But again, I don't think I would do that over again.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. When we were going through our master's program, me and my wife, my wife and I, we looked at others that were having kids and we are like, that's crazy town. But then we jumped into both of us in a PhD, private practice, babies, hurricanes, moves, and looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh,
How did we get through that?
Yeah,
Like, I
what
think
were we thinking?
Yeah. What were we thinking? I don't know. It's a good thing we weren't thinking, I guess.
Yeah, craziness. What was the biggest difference for you? That's a huge jump. And yeah, I tell students all the time, whether they're pre-graduation or post-graduation, go experience the world, so to speak, of in therapy, like see all the clients you want to see somebody that's severely mentally ill, schizophrenic, bipolar, etc. Go see some, individuals that are teens, kids, or whatever, and like broad exposure, and then figure out kind of who your tribe is and go from there. But also with, if you can do inpatient, if you can do some sort of in-home care, if you could do a private practice, etc., just to kind of figure out what you like, what you don't like. For you, obviously, those type of jobs, you're massive, like your caseload's usually huge. I don't know if yours was, but typically they are. So going from like high volume, lots of travel, a lot of dynamics because you're in somebody else's home, like, you're really like on the fly figuring out who's who really quickly and then working with somebody in their environment to, hey, this is private practice, which is totally different. I'm curious for you, what was that shift like, and like what were the big things that you noticed that were different?
It's very interesting because I look back and the in-home felt very familiar to me. So because probably my childhood, because I was used to being able to work well in chaos, like the busyness was nice. It wasn't nice, but it felt nice to me. And then moving into private practice was like very slow. And although it was what I wanted, it was also like I should be doing more. Like that was kind of this thought that kept coming up for me is I should be doing more than just this. But I also knew that that's where I wanted to be. So it was like kind of a hard like integration transition for me, because it was like, this is what I want, but also my body's not used to this. So
Yeah.
that was hard, I think.
It's interesting you pointed that out. Obviously, we see this with the soft population that we work with, but I'll just say high achievers, high performers as well, right? So they're able to compartmentalize and live in chaos, and it's normal. And then all of a sudden they get in something that's quote unquote a little bit healthier or normal. And their bodies are telling them like, crazy messages like, hey, I need to go back into the chaos, or they end up subconsciously seeking it out.
Yeah.
What did you take away for you? Like, what did you learn the most about yourself? But then also clinically in the in-home setting.
Oh, that's really a good question, actually. So clinically, I think, and this is where it's kind of difficult for me still, because I think I saw how important it was to include the whole family, especially when you're working with kids. And even to this day, like I'm very ethical and make sure that I adhere to ethical boundaries and everything, but I will take on clients as individuals and as couples. And I think it's because I have that in-home background that's like, I need, like, when you get the whole picture, you can do so much more work.
Yeah.
But again, I am very like adhere to strict boundaries and making sure that both clients are okay with those boundaries when I do that work. But I think it showed me that is like, especially when you're working with children, you can only do so much work with the child behind the four walls of your office, but you can do so much more when the whole family is in the room with you and you're working on different things happening in their family environment.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for those that are listening that may be interested, or some of the young counselors, because I point a bunch of my students to the channel when different providers and individuals come on. There's this concept or perspective. I'll just say it's a varying perspectives within our field, that if some clinicians say, hey, if you're working with a couple, let's say I'm working with or Stacy's working with a married couple, and one of them wants to peel off and do individual trauma therapy, like, you shouldn't cross those ethical lines. You should only work with them and see them as the couple. And then the other perspective, which I agree, and Stacy lands on as well, is, hey, I could work with the individual, but I could also work with the couple, because at the end of the day, the information as a clinician, you have to be careful what you're bringing across and make sure, all the documents are signed correctly if information is allowed to be transferred. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. In my practice, the same thing. I feel like, well, I have the full picture, as opposed to Jane could come in off the street and tell me her husband's a terrible guy, blah, 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 blah. And I have to use my clinical skills to figure out, based on our goals, whether how much of that's true, how much of that is not true, and then how much of that is, really plays into how we interact, interventions we do. Whereas if I can get him to come in even for a session, or them start couples counseling, well, now I've got the full picture. Because I don't know if you're experienced this, but I have. Early in my career, it was like, okay, yeah, like, this guy sounds terrible, or your wife sounds terrible, and then the husband or the wife
see him and you're like,
decides to come in. I'm like, whoa, this is watching them in action. I'm like, okay, like, one of you bamboozled me. Like, I took that bait way too easily. And I think that's just a fault of a young clinician. But again, if you're not willing to see the whole couple or the family, you're leaving a lot of meat on the bone, I think.
Yeah, agreed. So I think, being in the in-home setting, it really showed me that. I'm so thankful for that. And then also, like, individually for myself, or I guess personally for myself, was like, I came from this environment. Like, I don't want to be in this type of environment.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going I did not come from this type of background, but I was going in-home in Norfolk, Virginia, in some really not so great places. And here I am, this little blonde-haired girl getting out of a black tinted out Tahoe. And like, I can see a drug deal happening down the street. And I'm like, oh gosh, like this is not good for me. But really just like kids are growing up in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I imagine that's heartbreaking too, as a clinician, but as a human being, going to the houses and seeing some of the elements that individuals are seeing day to day outside their four walls in their community, but then also in home. I've heard some pretty terrible stories from students and other clinicians over the course of my career of some of the in-home work that they've had to do, and just how heart-wrenching it is to walk away from a kid in a situation where they've got next to nothing and they're living in nothing too.
Yeah. And I mean, there were times I'd changed my clothes before, like heading back into my house, like leaving the clothes outside because they would be so bad sometimes. And, just real grateful that my kids don't have to grow up in an environment like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I always ask individuals from the military this question, favorite place that you got stationed and why?
I feel like they all have something, like there was some that I loved the job that I did. There was some that I loved the location I was in. I think one of my favorites was actually St. Louis, Missouri. And that's going to sound so crazy because like we were in Hawaii for 4 years and it was not my favorite. But the St. Louis, Missouri one, because it was easy. It was very easy to go to work, leave my work there, and go home. And reflecting back, I mean, at the time, I probably would have not said it was my favorite. But reflecting back, I'm like, that's what I loved about that place.
The degrees of separation. Yeah. Interesting. What did you get, rock fever? What was the rub about Hawaii?
Well, I was pregnant I had 2 of my kids there. So my 2 oldest were born there. So I was pregnant. We're there for 4 years. I was pregnant for what, like 16 months of that. That was a big part of why it was not the greatest. And then, kind of like the island fever thing that people talk about. When we got to Hawaii, like we had never been to Hawaii. And I remember coming out of the airport thinking, well, this is Hawaii? Like I was disappointed immediately. There's a bunch of homeless people in tents, like as you're coming out of the airport, and the beaches were not that nice. There are a lot of rocky, like lava beaches, and I didn't know that. That was not what I expected. So I think from the beginning, I had really high expectations of what Hawaii would look like, and it was not that. And then I actually had complications with my first son. I was in the hospital for over 30 some days and then on bed rest the rest. So that was not also great. The weather was amazing. I loved the weather there. But it got old. Like there's no seasons, and not that I need full out seasons, but there's no weather change. It's the same all the time. Right. So like, different times of the year, you're like, it doesn't even feel like Christmas, or it doesn't even feel like summer, like when you're not used to that. So, and then every trip back was a trip to visit family, and you didn't get your own vacations. So I think all that played a big part. And we like to road trip. We like to travel. So we didn't get to do that there.
I'm with you. We've been down in Tampa for coming up on 8 years. And that's the one thing I think we want to do more now that our youngest is older. We do like to road trip, but the seasons as well. Like I get weird right around August and start looking around at moving. I'm like, what? Well, maybe we can move here. Maybe we can move here. And it's just a brief 2-week period, but I'm like wanting fall. Cause football season and hunting season, it just, for me, it signifies cold weather. And I don't know, I've noticed the last decade or so, like I get this itch of like, it should be cold, not, hurricane season, but whatever. Okay. So I'd love to hear. So you're in private practice. Obviously, you guys end up at Norfolk and then down in the Panhandle to end the career. You start counseling. What was, did you know you want to work with veterans right out of the gate? And then when's the first time you heard about psychedelics in the sense of therapeutic? And, take us kind of through that process of what your first thoughts were.
Yeah. So when I moved into private practice, initially I wanted to work with kids, which in-home was great for. I got that experience quickly, again, realized I can only make so much change in a kid because they keep going back to the same environment. And while I love making that change for them, it's really defeating as a clinician. So quickly realized that wasn't my ideal population. We're in Norfolk, Virginia Beach, where there's a lot of like military community. I started seeing some military members and then still kept going back to that moment that I was sitting at my desk thinking, why do they keep coming back to this? And I was like, there's something there. Like, and I just kept like praying to God about like, what is it that's there? How do I help this? And then really just kind of transformed into like, I think that, and this is what my doctoral research is on, I think that, kids who decide they want to join the military or adults that decide they want to join the military come from some of these significant childhood experience backgrounds. The military is a wonderful structure for someone who comes from a background like that. And I think that it's really hard for someone to come out of that environment once they've had it for so long and figure out like their own path and their own way because of the structure that it provided and because of the identity that they grew within it. There's a lot of, if you look into identity development and all of that, there's a lot that gets overlooked when you come from childhood adverse experiences and then go into the military. You don't really have a chance to develop your own identity. And I think that's what I realized was happening with people that were getting out or retiring is like, I don't have an identity outside of this, so I'm just going to go back to this. And as I was starting to like see that and see that within myself and how I didn't want to do that, I was also like, that's where I want to be. And so we moved from there to actually Mobile, Alabama was my last unit.
Okay.
We moved there and I was doing telehealth still for the same private practice for a while. And then I guess we can go into this too, but like I had a really bad back surgery done when I was in Virginia. And it was just too much for me. I couldn't keep up with working and doing clinical hours of therapy. And so, hang on, I'm tracking. My brain is going too fast for me right this second.
No, you're good. What'd you go in for the surgery for, and what ended up happening with that?
Yeah, so I had a severely herniated disc at L4, L5. Don't know what caused it. The only thing that I know is it was during COVID. I did not have a great boss at that unit. It was my worst unit. The last year there was my worst ever in the entire Coast Guard. And it was a civilian who was my boss. And during COVID, I get very jealous, actually. This is a trigger, so I probably need to work on it some. But there's a lot of people that had it great during COVID. They didn't have to do a whole lot, it was kind of like a break for them. Well, that was not my experience. I had 3 kids at home. We were trying to figure all that out. And I was required to be at the computer 8 hours a day. If I got an IM and did not answer back, like my phone was ringing off the hook, like I was in trouble that I wasn't right there on my computer the entire time. And I remember standing up. At the beginning of COVID, we didn't have desks and stuff at home. I was sitting at my kitchen table. I stood up and my back like gave out in that moment. There was so much pain. I don't know what happened, but I think I was just sitting for so long. And then the way I stood up, it just, something herniated, something happened. So I dealt with that for about 8 months, did all the physical therapy, the steroid injections, no relief at all. and actually, once I got my MRI, because they do it backwards, they have you do physical therapy and actually the injections were after the MRI. But as soon as I got my MRI, the doctor called me and was like, hey, I don't want you to do anything. Like, because it was that bad. And then I got the steroid injections twice, and then neither of them worked. So it was surgery after that. It was a laminectomy at L4, L5.
Okay. And how'd the surgery go?
Not good. Yeah. So during that surgery, there was a dura tear, which is that the dura protects your spinal cord and your spinal fluid. And because that was torn, I was leaking cerebral spinal fluid, and it was just probably one of the worst experiences of my life. Actually, not probably, it was the worst experience of my life. Terrible. If anyone has ever had a spinal fluid leak, it is the worst headaches, the worst nausea you can ever even imagine. You can't sit up without getting sick. I immediately told the doctor that, and I had a lot of numbness that I didn't have before the surgery, and told them that, and was kind of brushed off, actually. And I actually went up to the ER 2 days later and was like, hey, something is not right. He operated on me I think 2 times, an additional 2 times, to try to correct the leak. Still nothing. And actually, as we were moving down to Mobile, I was driving with the spinal fluid leak, and it had swollen up so bad that there looked like there was an alien coming out of my back. It was huge spinal fluid. And so I had to stop at an emergency room and go to the emergency room. And then another surgeon at Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina, operated on me. And still did not fix. I was much better after that, but it was still not fixed completely. Yeah. So then fast forward, I don't know how I did it, Chris. I still went to work every day. I had 4 years left in the military. I was you
couldn't get a medical waiver or anything?
So I could have gotten a medical waiver, but they would have med boarded me. And when you get med boarded or medically retired, you can't collect your retirement and your disability pay both. You can only get one or the other, whichever is higher.
Okay.
So I knew that I needed to make it to retirement at 20 years in order to collect both.
And how many years away were you at this point, going down to Mobile?
4 years. 4 years away.
Oh,
I know.
Side note, I had a client when I lived in North Carolina that had a spinal leak. They didn't know they had a spinal leak. Duke ended up finding it. It was like a micro leak. And yeah, firsthand seeing their mornings were tolerable, and then the afternoons, like, they couldn't move.
Yeah.
Pretty horrific experience. So I can only imagine what you were going through. Oh.
It was terrible. But still, like, I worked that whole time through it. But that was when I was like, hey, I can't do the Coast Guard and do clinical counseling at the same time, at least not for the hours that they wanted me to, which they need to get so many hours out of me to cover their own costs of putting me on their thing. So it was partially that, and partially I wanted to go out on my own anyway. I wanted to be able to have my own hours, pick my own clients, kind of thing. So I left there and started my own private practice, and just very small amounts. And actually for about 2 years, I wasn't even seeing any clients. 2 years total out of that whole 4 years, I wasn't seeing clients at all, just because of my medical stuff happening. So that was where I actually reached out to you, shortly after starting my own private practice, and saying hey, I really feel a call to work with the special operations community. I have military background, but I don't have special operations background. And thankfully, Chris, you took a chance on me and here I am.
Well, honestly, and just to let everybody know, I know we say it if somebody emails us, It's not a prerequisite that you have to have experience with soft. We try to screen, and the vast majority of our providers do come from soft. But at the time, did Steven interview you?
I think so.
Yeah, so we always have. I'm not from the soft community. We always have an individual from the soft community interview as well, and we've had other providers, I'll say, carefully craft answers around that. And both, when me and Steven both asked you that separately, and then when, just a little bit of self-disclosure, when him and I got together and talked about you, the fact that you just owned it and were exactly, I mean, very similar to the soft community, like, hey, I don't, but like, here's my passion. I'm willing to work. I'm willing to figure it out. I come from the military. It was like, hey, I think this provider is going to be like really, really solid. And that honesty is what, I mean, that's why we took a chance on you, to be honest. And so kudos to you for, being transparent there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah, so I just began, I got in with you guys, and that was like my start, really within this community. And I love working with this community still, this many years later. It's like, it is so enjoyable. And that's kind of how, I transitioned into, not transitioned fully, but like dipped my feet in the psychedelic medicine world, because a lot of these operators were going to get plant medicine treatment, and I was seeing how amazing the treatment was for them alongside the work that we were doing.
Right.
So that's how I kind of got into this field.
So in this like niche, right? It's like the sub area of therapy, right? So we just had Lindsay on, and she'll definitely, like I mentioned, be on before you. And so we'll have a little bit of a background of psychedelics. And she did an amazing interview. If you're watching this and you haven't watched it, please go watch that episode as well. But so as a provider, you're starting to work with individuals that, I don't know if your experience, I think a lot of us have had this experience in Soft Network where clients are just like, hey, I'm going, and you're already working with them. And so you're kind of on the fly figuring out things. But what were some of the things that you were, seeing, the good, the bad? Like, I'm curious, like first impressions, obviously, because, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer, all this was fairly new. For some people, it still is fairly new. But as a clinician, you're watching your clients go down to Mexico, or depending upon which organization they're working with, are going and partaking. Like, I'm curious, like, what were some of your early takeaways as a clinician?
Yeah, so I think the biggest takeaway for me was like, it was like a fast forward button. So a lot of the work we were doing is the work that you see happen with the psychedelic medicine, but it's just like so much quicker with the psychedelic medicine. There's a lot of awareness, a lot of like internal processing happening in that medicine journey that potentially, takes us months, 6 to 12 months to get out of our treatment. And it's happening very quickly with the plant medicine. And I had a lot of clients that I would see before and after their plant medicine, and just say that it took the work that we did and just like amplified it. So, it's not that our work is different with the modalities that I use. It's very similar to what psychedelic medicine does for you. But when you have a knowledge of that before you enter the medicine, and then you have that same support after, it cushions that plant medicine experience so much better. But also I don't know, fast forward is not the word, but that, I guess, good enough. Like, just, it's so much quicker.
Yeah. I came up with it's not really an analogy, more like a word picture description. When I was interviewing Lindsay, or actually, Lindsay, it hit me because I had been using Aaron Wolfgang's and he's just the lead in Walter Reed on the active duty side, looking at psychedelics. But at a conference several years ago, he said we need to look at psychedelics as the anesthesia to therapy, which is, surgery. So they go together, and one allows the other to go quicker. So to your point of like fast forward, but from like a mental picture, what I put together in my head, because Lindsay was talking about, hey, there's a settling period, right? She kept using the word settling. So I was thinking, I don't know, spatial, like, okay, so if the dysfunction is the furniture in the room, psychedelic medicine almost levitates or lessens the weight of the furniture, instead of like lugging it around doing therapy and trying to, hey, your table goes over here, your mommy and daddy issues go over here. It almost allows that weight to be drastically reduced, almost like anti-gravity, so that, that 6 weeks after psychedelics, we can move around the room, or the client can move those objects around the room much quicker with much less ease, or excuse me, with much more ease. And then as things settle down post that 6 weeks period, or during that 6 week period, it seems like the progression is just amplified. And so just going back to your analogy of like fast forward, like, I mean, that makes a lot of sense based on what she said and how our conversation went, but also anecdotally, some of the things I've seen with some of my clients.
Yeah, for sure. I think how I kind of think of it is, once you have done the plant medicine, and I want to be very careful, because plant medicine isn't the only way to get to this point. You can also get to this point just in therapy. But and I say just, but not negatively in any way.
Sure.
But it allows you to become an observer of those actions and behaviors that you've taken on, instead of being those actions and behaviors that you've taken on. And so once you're able to do that, again, like with your analogy of the furniture in the room, you can look at it and be like, yeah, I'm not going to be that couch right now, or I'm not going to go do that thing again. You have the choice, but you still have to make the choice, even after the plant medicine.
Right. And I think, I didn't do this well with Lindsay, and I probably should have. You made a great point. So therapy in and of itself can be quick. I think what people don't understand, or maybe don't have a good conceptualization, and this may help, is specifically when you're doing some sort of trauma therapy, like all good therapy, whether you're doing anxiety therapy, trauma work, like it's all built on exposure therapy to a large degree. Now you may use EMDR, you may use trauma focused CBT. There's a lot of different modalities, brain spotting, etc. Right? You can use whichever stick you want to use for a modality. But what's happening is, if we're going to expose somebody, right? Let's just say anxiety, the quickest way for them to get through that anxiety is small, so titrated doses, like real small, manageable doses, so they're in the window of tolerance where we're reactivating the anxiety in session, but also creating homework out of session, so they're getting a little bit of that anxiety, but then we're getting them to calm the nervous system down. And I think this is the main point, is when you do trauma work, you're activating the nervous system, but you only want to get it slightly activated, and then they have to have the tools and the wherewithal to dial that down while, to use that analogy, moving the furniture. And to your point, like, it's so ingrained in them to just, once that nervous system starts, go full bore. And to your point, like, they become the couch or whatever attribute that they personally struggle with, or their protective part runs into. And now the whole mechanism, right? We're fighting, the biology is now fighting the process within therapy, and now we're losing. And so that's why traditional trauma therapy took so long. Of course, EMDR came along and it made it, or exposed, hey, this is another path that seemed to be, or is not seem to be, extremely faster. But to your point, psychedelics seems to be potentially an even faster opportunity to do trauma work, because we're calming down the nervous system to a degree that now we can actually move things around and process things without the nervous system engaging.
Yes.
So for you watching this, I'm curious, you're watching your clients go to psychedelics, come back, you guys are doing great work, you're seeing them improve. I always ask, clinicians when I meet them throughout the process of, onboarding and just different things, like any negative experiences personally, watching your clients go through psychedelics or experience psychedelics and then, either in the integration phase. But, obviously right now everything's to a large degree sold as like sunshine and rainbows, but, anything other than that you've experienced?
I think it's a kind of a tough question. I have experienced that more so with people that I did not see before psychedelic medicine.
Okay.
Like it's like they don't have the foundation in
Okay.
order to know what's happening afterwards. So I have seen that quite often.
So like,
I've
just
also,
to clarify, like clients that went and did psychedelics and then came to you and said,
yes.
"Hey, Stacy, I want to work with you." Okay.
Yes. Yep. And then there are some, I mean, that psychedelic medicine can show you some significantly repressed memories that people have no recollection of. And then later on find out like, oh yeah, that did happen to me. Now, I think that there's also the other side of that where, if you look at it from like a Jungian lens, it will symbolize something happened to you, even if it didn't happen to you. And I think that both happens, but for the ones that the medicine reveals something that did happen to them, that can really pull them back in their trauma work because they did not know, they don't know what to do with it. I've seen some that, they've had significant sexual abuse as a kid. The medicine revealed that to them. They came out with behaviors like they were still that kid.
Yeah.
And so they kind of get trapped in that part that gets revealed to them. And without the right treatment afterwards, you don't know how to navigate that. You need help to navigate that.
Yeah. Great point. And this is something, again, for young clinicians or people that just aren't clinicians. One of the things, anytime a clinician is going to do trauma work, you've got to do a thorough assessment. But one of the things that you've got to assess for is obviously stability of like, hey, we're going to go in and as a partnership, we're going to talk about some really painful things, and it's going to open, those wounds to a certain degree. But as a clinician, I don't know what other things are in there. And so there's a process of either re-traumatizing you because we're going back into something you remember or you remember slightly. But then to your point, sometimes you go in that and there's connected memories and you're experiencing something like, oh, yeah, my uncle abused me. But when we started doing therapy, I started having dreams or flashbacks of actually I was abused by my grandfather too. And now how do they deal with that? Because the very mechanism that was intended to start to heal them is now starting to traumatize them. And so without, proper support, grounding techniques, real ethical, assessment and behavior, work by the clinician, but also the client, this can get really messy really, really quickly.
Yeah.
So for you, the majority, if I'm following you, the majority of what you saw on the negative side, or at least maybe the not so productive side, was individuals choosing to go do psychedelic therapy on their own, and then afterwards, them coming to you with no real foundation because you guys hadn't worked together, figured out I know you do parts work, some of their parts. And just side note, if you don't know about IFS, you want to share a little bit about IFS? So when we start talking about parts that
yeah. So I'm not fully trained. I'm not trained in IFS. I do a lot of parts work and I've done a lot of trainings in IFS, just not IFS through their institute. It's very hard to get into that, unfortunately. But parts work is basically like if you are doing something that you're behaving in a certain way and like you come out of that behavior and you're like, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that behavior. It's almost like you're taking on a part of you, and that part is there because it protected you from something. And so, like anger, if you take on a very angry part, that the anger is, I'm just giving an example. It's not always this, but like protecting you from being disappointed or being hurt. And so you will then become when something feels like it's about to hurt you or disappoint you, you'll take on that anger part. And what the parts work does is just kind of figure out, what parts am I taking on? Where did they start? And how do I heal those parts so I don't take that on anymore?
Yeah. Yeah. No, great example. So for you, a huge part of what you saw for individuals that it wasn't very productive, or maybe ended up being productive, but early on wasn't productive, was you guys hadn't had an established relationship. They went and did psychedelics on their own to some capacity, whether it was through an organization or whatnot, and then afterwards realized, hey, I actually need to do therapy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No, I would say the same thing. One of the deficits in this area, and we're going to talk to Diego. He's a former Navy SEAL who is a coach, but not a licensed clinician. And some of our early conversations together were, hey, what are clinicians doing well? What are coaches doing well? What are we not doing well? How are we not communicating across the space? Because shocker, to everyone that's not in this space, this is all brand new and we're all going a million miles an hour. And so some of the structure and systems that need to be put in place are not put in place. And so this is part of the reason we're having these conversations, is to flesh out, like, hey, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? But then what are areas and systems we need to work on? And I would say, and this is why we set it up with vets and heroic hearts as well, of like making sure that we are getting connected with clients. If our clients are going, making sure we're getting them connected with the coaches early, and there's communication back and forth. That way there's collaboration. And then for sure, after the treatment is done and they get into the integration phase. But as a whole, and an industry standard, there's no industry standards. There's no ethical lines here of who does what. I mean, it's just the wild, wild west. And so I would agree. And unfortunately, like Lindsay and I were discussing, to combat what general society knew about psychedelics, the positive information and flow, I use the analogy of a wave, it just had to be so much higher to come over this wall of rigidity and negativity. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, what's being lost is the important conversations of the nuances of, like, hey, psychedelics doesn't always work. And Lindsay was great to point out, like, some people it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But also, if we're going to do the preparation, the treatment, and the integration, the preparation needs to be really good, so that as a clinician, hey, we know some of your faults, your triggers, some of your traumas, and prepare you as best as possible as a clinician and also a coach, so that if those horrendous things come out, or in some capacity you're facing them, you have some tools and skills and ability to navigate that. But then in worst case scenario, like you're talking about, if something unknown comes out, again, you've got the support and you've got some tools while you're in the process of the treatment, as well as in the integration, where you can actually deal with some of that. And to Lindsay's point, why we've got, I'll say the anti-gravity time of that 6-week or 4-week window, we can do as much work as possible, so that the individual's not cycling of like, hey, I went down, I did psychedelics, things were great for about 6 weeks or whatever, and then they're not in therapy, they're not really moving around the furniture, and then 6 months later they're reapplying, and the cycle continues.
Right.
Any other, from your perspective, things that you've seen personally, that hey, ideas, obviously you're working on the front lines, like what are things that as a clinician you wish was built as far as systems, or things that if you were president, quote unquote, for the day, like what would you change?
I really just think the preparation and integration parts of the psychedelic, I think there needs to be more emphasis on that, especially like what I like most about the work that I do, and I'm not saying that my way is the only way, I just know what I do and I experience it, is that it gives them a taste on a smaller scale of what the plant medicine is going to do for them. And so they kind of have already like a little bit of history or experience with it. and then it doesn't shock their system as much when they go in to do it. And I think we need more of that.
Well, that's a great point. At what point for you, and this kind of transitions back to you personally, and part of the reason I brought you on, like, when did you personally get curious about psychedelics?
Well, I mean, from the beginning, because like you see some of these, it's pretty amazing the transition you see in some of these clients, like when they get back out of plant medicine, whether it's, I work a lot with people who have gone and done ibogaine, but I also see some people that have done psilocybin, not so much in the ketamine area, and also ayahuasca and bufo or 5-MeO.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see them before and you see them after, there's such a light to them. So much weight has been lifted off of them. And that got me curious. Like what is that? Even, like, how is that happening? What is that about? And just seeing the shifts in people's mindsets and then being able to work with that shift. I mean, there's been several times that I've questioned my own work, and I'm in a way that I'm like, maybe I just want to work with people that are going to do plant medicine, because it's just easier. It like opens up that neural pathway to like allow such great work to happen. So, I think that is a huge thing that I see. I love that. I love that, especially within the work that I do. It's essentially the same type of work, just with different pathways in place.
Yeah. So you're watching people come back, and that's a very common experience for a lot of providers that I've talked to, self included, of watching clients, as best I can describe, very heavy and weighed down, both emotionally, but a lot of former operators or guys on the tail end of their career that all the trauma's kind of settling in, or you can see they're actually taking time to actually face it, and it's just this huge, like, heavy blanket on these individuals, and it looks like a 500-pound gorilla that they're carrying around. And there's physical ailments, right? There's all sorts of injuries that they've been masking throughout their career, and then they go and do psychedelics, and the lights are on. They're so much lighter, and their ability to move through therapy seems like it's almost effortlessly to a certain degree. And of course, this is the other thing, Jeremy we talked about this because he was an assessment selection. These guys are all one standard deviation above in intelligence. So they're very capable individuals, but now that we've given them like almost like a breath of fresh air with psychedelics, they're moving, and they want to. And I think that's another aspect of all this. So for you, you're watching your clients, you're seeing the lights come on, so to speak, and they're moving through. What was the conversation like internally? And I would assume with your husband, of like, hey, I think I want to do this.
Yeah. So because of all my surgeries, my back surgeries, and all of those complications, so I had 4 surgeries total. And then I had 2 blood patches to try to fix the cerebral spinal fluid leak. After my first blood patch, I was significantly better. I could sit up, and I could sit up all day and really not have any symptoms. But the second I started to walk or stand, I would only have about 15, maybe 20 minutes of that before symptoms of the cerebral spinal fluid leak would come back.
Holy cow.
And so I went back, and I went to California at Cedars-Sinai. Walter Shavink is one of the best in the world for cerebral spinal fluid leaks. He is a neurosurgeon, though, and I cannot be operated on again because of my scar tissue and nerve damage. I say I can't. It's very risky for me to get operated on again. So the blood patches were really my only option, unless something was like super significant and it would be less risk to go in and correct it. So I went and got my second one. Complete disaster. I was worse off. I was like, I will never go get another one, because what happens is your body learns to create so much cerebral spinal fluid. If you plug that hole, so to speak, your body's still creating so much because it's been trying to compensate for so long. You go into rebound high pressure. There's conflicting research on if it's because you're sealed or not, but whatever, I don't know why that is, but I definitely went into rebound high pressure, and I will take a cerebral spinal fluid leak any day over the rebound high pressure, because with the cerebral spinal fluid leak, you can work with it. Like I can go lay down and I will feel better. But with the rebound high pressure, there's like no way to get rid of it except for taking some medicines that make you feel completely terrible. They made my fingertips numb. It was just awful. And there's no other way to like really get around it. So it took about 6 months for that to wear off. And then my symptoms were back again. And, a lot of other things that happen is I have a lot of nerve damage. They diagnosed me with fibromyalgia, but I don't think I have had fibromyalgia. I think it was just my nerve damage and scar tissue damage, and my body was just like inflamed all the time. And so I would have to get like prednisone packs about every 6 months to like reduce the inflammation so that I could function. Finally, I ended up having a really bad back flare up November of last year, and I couldn't move. It was like I was having contractions. The second I would move my body, my back would instantly cramp up, muscle spasms. Like I could not even move in my bed. Like if I turned over to like move and get comfortable, it would just spasm for, it felt like contractions, to be honest, back contractions. And after that, I went to the ER. I had great friends that were in town. My husband was out of town. They brought me to the ER. But after that, I was just like, I am so tired of this. Like, I want my life back. And I had seen people come back out of ibogaine with like, less nerve pain, less nerve damage. Some of their TBI symptoms were gone, which I also had TBI from the spinal fluid leaks because my brain was shifting. And I was like, you know what? I have nothing to lose at this point. I'm going. And told my husband, I was like, hey, I think I'm going to go. I contacted some people. I was like, hey, when's the soonest you can get me in? And it was like 3 weeks away. And I was like, I'm going. Like, I have nothing to lose at this point. I'm going. And really like spent a lot of time in prayer about it. And, going into it with the belief that it's not really the medicine. And this kind of goes into my parts work, is I'm removing the parts that will not allow me to heal. And, because God can do miracles. And I just am not, I think it's hard when you have a physical ailment like that to believe that repair can be done. And I could not get there on my own to believe that repair could be done.
So you're going in, and I think you and I talked right before you went in. So you're going in, and I don't know if I asked you this. I don't think I did, but how confident are you, or how hopeful are you that physically, like, you're going to get some relief and or like, complete relief?
So I was not confident, but I really was like, God, if you can do this for me, like, this is the time that you can do this for me. Like, it was a lot of prayer to God, to just be able to give me what I needed from that experience. And it wasn't like, hey, I want my back to be healed, or hey, I want these symptoms to be gone. Yes, those are great things. I wanted them, but I didn't expect any of it. I was just like, this is what I want, whatever you can give me.
Okay. So I know you end up getting screened. I'm sure all the screeners went well because you went. And so you're at the facility, you're going to get ibogaine. Like, I'm curious, leading up to that moment, like fears, concerns, you're a clinician, like there's that part of you that's like, okay, now I'm the patient, but like how much of the clinical mind is like, all right, about to go down the rabbit hole, here we go. Take me through kind of your thought process there.
Yeah, I think it is a little hard. I tried not to think about it, if I'm being completely honest. And because I had done so much work, like prepping for this to be what God wanted to give me from it, I questioned that actually. I was like, am I not doing enough? Like, am I
Mm-hmm.
not thinking enough into this? Do I not have enough expectations? And not expectations. We try to shift from expectations, but like desires, intentions is the word we use. But do I not have enough intentions? Like I started questioning that process, and just something in my gut was like, Stacy, just stop. Like, just stop. Just let it be. And even when we were standing around the fire, they have you have a burn list of things that you want to burn, right? Like I wrote some things down, things you don't want to carry along with you after this experience. And some people threw in entire books of things. And I was like, I have like 4 words on mine. Like, am I doing this wrong? Right. Like, so even as a clinician, I'm sitting there thinking like, am I doing this wrong?
Right.
But yeah, I did not think too much into it. Mine was very much like, I'm going to surrender to whatever you have for me.
Okay. And then for you, had you ever done any recreational drugs previously?
I did about 4 months prior to my Ibogaine, I did a psilocybin and bufo.
Okay. Okay. So a little bit of experience in the realm. Tell people like as much as you can, but also, as little as you want, what the experience was like as far as, I think people on the outside are like, hey, I, take Ibogaine, and then, the walls melt, or like, take us through the process. Like, are you wearing headphones, eye mask, like paint the picture? But then for you, once it, reality began to shift a little bit, take us through that process.
Yeah, so you start off like 8:30 around the fire. They give you the first pill. You take 4 total. The last one is not a pill. The last one is a spoon of the medicine with honey. But you take the first pill around the fire after you've burned your intentions, and you just kind of like wait around. And I think it might be every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes. I really can't remember. You'll take another dose. I felt it. Gosh, I would say within 10 minutes, I could feel it in my body. And it was very vibrational in my body. My whole body was vibrating. And even the lights were like vibrating. And I was like, oh, like, wow, this is a lot, And then I took my second one, and again, it hit me very, very quickly. And everything was vibrating. I'm feeling kind of off. And so you don't have to be in the treatment room until that final dose. But I was like, I'm going. Like, this is hitting me. I'm going, right? And you go down to the treatment room, and there's a mirror that you can like watch yourself in. But I was vibrating so much that I just wanted to lay down. And I'm laying down, and I'm like, wow, this like it's coming like quickly for me. And like there's still people not in the room, but in my head, I'm questioning, do I take more? Like, I felt like it was like, that was enough for me. And then I had like a little voice come in and say, Stacy, you know that if you don't take it all, you're going to wonder, like, did I get the full effect or not? Or like, if I didn't get something that I wanted, would I blame myself? And like, I'm going through that whole process. Like, as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I'm just going to take it all. Like, I'll be fine,
Yeah.
And they come around with the third pill. I took the third pill, and then the final dose. And I wanted to like go all in, but I was not yet hooked up to the EKG. Cause again, like I came in so much earlier than everyone else. They didn't hook me up. I think they wait until everyone's down there to hook you up. And, I didn't want to fall in and be like interrupted for them to hook me up. So I'm like fighting it. And I really don't remember a whole lot in that fight. I just remember thinking like, don't fall in yet. Like I was resisting at that point. And they finally hooked me up. I put the mask on, and I was done. Like the rest of everyone else is like up, and they give you, I don't know what it's called. You shake it like a maraca, but I don't think it's called that. They give you that, and you're supposed to shake it like in front of the mirror. I was already like too far gone for that. They handed it to me, and I think I threw it. Like, I can't do that right now. But it's intense, and they're playing weedy music, and like the music is very overstimulating, and then you start hearing voices, and you think that people around you are talking, but if you look up, there's no one around you talking, but it's just very loud, and like everyone is talking. And what I think is the medicine is like really trying to disrupt your nervous system to like allow you to move in to something that's uncomfortable. That's just my process of like what happened. And so, you know, I close my mask, occasionally look out because I like think someone's talking to me, but no one's talking to me. And they're very good. I went to Ambio. They're very good. Like if someone does come to talk to you, they will touch you first. So that you know, like, hey, someone's here and actually talking to you. And that's how I knew, because my EKG throughout the whole experience, I don't know if like it was like falling off or something, but they kept having to come in and adjust it. And that's how I knew like someone was actually there, as they would touch me and let me know that they were there. But yeah. And so I was like in that moment after all those voices, think like you can start to tell like you're kind of calming down into the chaos. And in that moment, I was like, all right, I'm fully surrendering. I'm just like letting go of everything and just letting this take me where I need to go.
Super fascinating. And obviously everybody's experience is a little bit different. So from there, what was your experience like? You know, again, share as much as you want or as little as you want, and be general, but I'd be curious, like for you, what was next?
Yeah. So after I fell in, I saw, I don't know if you've ever watched the movie The Purge.
No, the trailers though.
Okay. It's not a good movie.
No.
So, The Purge, you know, there's one day a year that people can go out and kill people in this movie, and they dress up all weird, like, right? That's what I saw was these weird looking figures that we actually have a Halloween decoration. It's like this giant tall scarecrow, and it kind of looked like that, but it was moving around and like dancing. And I was like, in the movie, The Purge came up for me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be dark. And like, that was the questioning of like, did you prepare enough for this? Like popped into my head. Cause I was like, I really didn't think that it would go dark on me. I've done a lot of personal work. And so I was like, I doubt that it will go dark. I know it can, but I doubt it. Right. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is going to get dark, but I'm ready. Right. Like, and then they turned into actually military teams. And it was very, very interesting for me. It was, it was very emotional. I was watching teams, and I don't know like what, like maybe it doesn't matter. Military teams, go through their combats, like raiding homes, raiding buildings, going through combat fire, watching people get blown up with IEDs, watching, people get shot. I was like a third eye. I was like watching the whole thing, but it felt very much like these were people I love and that I'm close to that I'm losing. And so it was a lot of loss. And then, I'm watching all that. And then all of a sudden one image comes up and is like face to face with me. And I'm like, who is that? They're all in full gear, like full special operations gear. And I'm looking and I like look closer and it's like, oh my gosh, that's my husband. And like, so I see him and he's an Army veteran. And that's kind of what I'm thinking in my head as this is going on. I'm like trying not to think too much, but I just do. I'm a clinician. So he's face to face with me. And then all of a sudden it morphs into my oldest son. He's only 14 right now, but in that image, he was old enough to be in the Army or in the military. And then it morphed into my brother. And then it morphed into a stranger. So I'm face to face with this image who starts off as my husband, then my son, then my brother, and then a stranger. And then they go back into combat, and this person who shows up is injured. I saw them get injured. I don't know exactly what happened, but I saw them trapped. I saw them get medevaced. I saw them go to the hospital, get MRIs, CTs, laying in the hospital bed. Then I saw their in-field funeral, and I don't know what they call it. They might just call it that, but where they call out their name, but then they don't answer because they're no longer with us. And the medicine would not call out the name, but I knew that that's what it was. And then I saw their civilian funeral. And then at the end of that, I was put in a foxhole, and all of the military guys were all around the foxhole in like pushing me, like doing this to the right. And that whole thing repeated over and over and over for, you don't have a concept of time because you don't have a clock and there's no time down there, but it felt like hours.
Wow.
And I felt like I was sitting there thinking over and over, like, you know, when you watch a bad movie and you're like, okay, well, something has to happen, like in the movie, like that's what it felt like something has to happen. And the whole time that it's playing over and over, I keep feeling like it's my husband that I'm losing. So like it made me think that I had lost my husband over and over and over again. And it was really, really rough. And then I do remember a time asking it, like, why my other two sons weren't showing up, because it was interesting to me that my oldest son showed up, but my other two didn't. And so that question came to mind. And some people will say that the medicine shows up as an image for them. For me, it was not. It was just like a voice talking back to me. And you can communicate it with it. I did. I asked where my other two sons were, and it just kind of showed me off to the left, their faces, and they were smiling with kind of like the sense of like, they're okay over there, you know, like, don't worry about them. But at like that, it just kept replaying and replaying. And finally I was like, okay, like, I don't know why you keep showing me this. And that's what I said to the medicine. I was like, why do you keep showing me this? Immediate stop. So immediate movie stops. And then the word spine comes up and is in bright pink letters, like neon light letters for me.
Whoa.
And that's when it started. It goes from the very top of my vertebrae. It lit up every single vertebrae. And so it lights it up, it pulls it out, and then it would light up pieces of my vertebrae, remove them, and then bring in new ones, and then put it back. And it did that for every vertebrae down my back. And what was so interesting is I told you my body was vibrating. The part of me that has nerve damage is like my saddle region. And that part was not vibrating. So it felt like I had an upper half and a lower half vibrating, but they weren't connected. And once it finished my entire spine, that part started vibrating. I immediately noticed it right away. So it was like I was whole, like everything was in alignment.
Yeah.
Another thing that I forgot to mention too is when I first laid down, the medicine made me feel like my head was moved right and my legs were moved right. Like I was like almost like curved. But I looked out under my mask and I was completely straight. Like I was not curved, but like my brain thought I was. And because I have a lot of vertigo, I think it was like it shifted me. And I think it was repairing that imbalance in me as I was like thinking I was shifted, but I wasn't really. And then so it makes its way through my spine. Everything starts vibrating at that point.
Are you watching this?
Okay, so interestingly enough, the medicine, I was so nauseous. I did throw up a couple times in the beginning, but I wanted to close my eyes because it would help the nausea, and it wouldn't let me. So if I closed my eyes, it would stop. Everything stopped. There was nothing. But if I opened my eyes under my mask, I could see it. It was like a movie screen, like I was watching a movie. But I even asked it, like, can I just close my eyes? I really want to close my eyes. And it said no.
That's interesting. Cause I've had clients, it's the reverse. Like they were like, yeah, I could flip open my mask and it's like, there I am. And then as soon as I closed my eyes and put the mask down, like it was back to La La Land. Yeah.
Yes. I had to have my eyes open, but that, I think that was also like, I have trouble sometimes. Like I still to this day have trouble trusting people. It's hard for me to make eye contact. Before that, now I don't have any trouble making eye contact. So
interesting.
Maybe something that was working on in me that I didn't even know needed to be worked on. But I think that it did help that quite a bit. But so then it made its way through my spine and then it lights up my brain and blue, like it's just a blue light. It didn't remove anything. It just lit it up. And then after that, it went to like cells. So it would like it didn't show me where in my body, but it would like pull up a cell like I was looking at it through a microscope.
Mm-hmm.
And it would light up parts of the cell, move them out, and move new parts in. And then it did that. Like that was the rest of my journey for hours. Like it took a long time, but it felt very like just peaceful. Like it was very meticulous, very procedural, like just very like it knew what it was doing. And I'll never forget, like when the word spine came up, I was just like, oh, thank you. Like this is what I'm here for. And I was just like so thankful, like that's what it was doing for me. And then after it went through all my tissues, it did bring me back to the movie that it was showing me, and it let me know that the stranger was the one that passed away. It was not my husband. So it like gave me like peace even at the end.
So interesting. So for you, because you know this, there's a lot of people that have either grew up with a faith and they went through their military or their first responder career, and kind of that faith became dormant because of some of the terrible things they experienced or partook in, and then ibogaine or ayahuasca, any of the, and 5-MeO for sure, has almost rekindled their faith to whether they're hey, something's out there. I know because I felt it, I touched it, I heard it speak to me during the ceremony. And you're probably the third or fourth, I would say, individual that went in knowing like, hey, this is what I believe. I'm a Christian. Boom, 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 boom. So for you in that process, how much of this, and I was talking with Lindsay about this, the whole ecosystem talks about the medicine having like conscience, right? So we talked about that of like, hey, what is it? Is a portal? Is it, opening the realm? Is the medicine really have, its own entity? So for you, as this is happening, are, you felt, I'll say, the peace of God or that sense of, God being near. Is any of that correlating during this time or like totally different? I'm just, kind of as a fellow Christian, curious what that experience was like for you.
Yeah. So I think I kind of view it as the medicine. It sounds kind of weird, but maybe it'll be better after I explain it. It's almost like a portal to God. Like, not that we need it. We don't need that portal, but I feel like it like allowed me to open so that God could like directly reach me with none of my protections in the way.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, theologically, that's a whole nother discussion of how that's possible, if that's possible, all that. But part of the reason I wanted to bring you on is just that, like, so this is the huge another area of psychedelics where I feel a little bit more comfortable talking about it, but I have my own personal beliefs, right, as a Christian, but having a training theologically at a seminary, there's a lot more personal perspective I have, but to see or to say, hey, do I believe that, psychedelics could be this vehicle or this portal to unlock greater access? I mean, to your point, yeah. I mean, most Christians believe, hey, God has infinite amount of access to you at all time. He's here right now. Most Christians believe he's everywhere, right? He's omnipresent. He's in the past. He's in the present. He's in the future. But this is the undeniable thing, right? You and other people we know have had physical ailments and gone, and their body has responded in miraculous ways. And this is part of the hype train, but also like this is reality. And you're living it. And so, yeah, take us through, because I want to hear like the back end, but kind of take us through how it ended and then what your next day, and obviously it's been a couple of months since you did it, what the aftermath has been.
Yeah, so the next day is rough. They call it gray day. It is not a fun day at all. I felt so sick. It feels like the worst hangover of your life.
Mm.
And I remember looking, I went with 12 girls. There's 12 of us total, so 11 other girls. And a couple of them had been there for the second time and then one for the third time. And I remember looking at them and thinking, why the heck would you come back? Like, it's like, I don't ever want to do this again, right? Like, and really not because of my experience, like in the medicine, you're still in the medicine on grade A. It's still working. It's just working very differently. And it was because of that. Like that was rough. I was so nauseous. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink. I was forcing myself to like move around and do something because I knew if I did, I would feel better, you know? And yeah, so that day you just feel bad. You just don't feel good. The following day, Friday, it was Friday. I woke up. I felt like, and I knew I was 27 again. Like I felt the way my body felt when I was 27. And I was like, holy crap, this is so crazy. Like what happened? Like yesterday I even woke up and I felt terrible, but I feel like $1 million today. And I've still stayed that course since, and it is March 10th will be 3 months. I have no symptoms of a spinal fluid leak.
4 days away, just so everybody knows.
Yeah. So 4 days away. Sorry. But I have no symptoms of a spinal fluid leak. I've had no flare-ups. I've had very minimal pain. The only pain that I've had is like, I mean, I walked over 40,000 steps. We went to Vegas a couple weeks ago, and like, I haven't been able to do that in over 5 years. Yeah. So
I'm
like,
lucky to break 400 working from home.
yeah. And I mean, meanwhile, prior to this, like the most steps I would get in a day is like maybe 800. Just because I was so not good. Like I could sit up all day just fine, but I just was not good, you know? And so that's the only pain that I've had is my body's not used to being able to be active. And it's like, I'm relearning that process. It's very like normal pain from what I've experienced so far. No nauseousness, even on the flight back. Traveling was terrible for me, and I would get very, very nauseous, very, very dizzy. I felt in the plane like, you know, when you're getting dizzy, you like feel your brain kind of like spin a little bit, right? And then you know like the nauseousness is coming. Well, my brain would like spin, but there would be no nauseousness. And I'm like, this is the weirdest feeling ever. Like I know what to anticipate, but it's like not coming. And so like even that was huge for me to realize. And then, you know, being back, being able to do things, being motivated, you know, a lot of things that I even questioned in myself, like, well, am I lazy or am I sick? You know, like, cause I was living that way for so long and I was capable, but just not completely capable.
Right.
You know, simple things like going to the post office would like derail me before. And now I can go to the post office, and not only am I excited that I can do it, I'm also excited to look back and give myself grace because it wasn't that I was just lazy. You know, I was starting to think that of myself.
Right.
And, you know, now knowing that that was not the case at all, like it was my physical ailments that were preventing me from doing all of that stuff. Yeah, it has been life-changing for me.
That's incredible. Let's take a quick break. I'm about to burst. I got a few more questions for you, but I got to run and use the restroom. I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right. I'll just do this. Well, it's a good indicator of wherever I left off. I can see it. These conversations need to be had, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things I think as a academic and as a clinician is, and I've said this before, clinicians are stuck between the research being done and being published, but also what's working. And so ethically, if something is working, we can't ignore it in therapy per our ethics. And so as a clinician, if there's something that's emerging on the fringe, new, but it's helping our clients, there's a level of, I mean, as long as it's safe and as long as it's not harming other people, we're inclined to endorse it or explore it with the client. Okay.
Mhm.
So, and I've said this before on this channel before, 2018, one of my clients came to me and said, "Hey, I'm doing it." Right. And from that moment on, I've been on this journey personally of trying to understand it, both physiologically, obviously psychologically, but theologically, right? Because I do believe there's a God, and I believe, I'll just say general blanket, Christianity. And so there is something happening here, right? And there's, right, like bio, psycho, social, spiritual, and this medicine is transforming all these areas. And specifically, individuals, like we mentioned before, are coming that had a faith or had no faith, and now they're convinced there's a God. I believe it. I felt it. I've changed it. More. I want as many Christians to view this as possible, because and I think there's obviously a tremendous push in the soft community to discuss this. But one of the things that I want to push into in future conversations with other individuals is, what are some of the theological lines here? Because we know, or at least the proof is in the pudding, anecdotally, like Stacy's completely transformed at this point, right?
Yeah.
I've anecdotally had clients and other people, individuals with nerve damage, TBI issues, things like that, where, I mean, unexplainable. The only thing that we can really point to is the fact that they went in and had this experience and this treatment with psychedelics. And if there's that type of transformational, let's just say there's that transformational power. Let's push aside a little bit of the who's on the other side, who's opening the door, all of that. Let's just say there's this transformative medicine. We as clinicians, and we're going to have a medical doctor on next, like ethically, we need to be having these conversations and bringing some of this anecdotal data to the masses, because, man, there are people, Mormons, Catholics, fill in the blank, that have experienced terrible, terrible things, both physically, psychologically. And the more that these conversations can be had, I think, one, it'll make more stakeholders in the entire community that is America interested in exploring this. And so the more eyes on this process, the better, right? Because there's so many things that have to be refined, I would say, both medically, but also on our end of like what happens in therapy. How do we do it beforehand? What's the best? We don't even know. Hey, does EMDR work better, or does IFS work better pre and post? And maybe it's an IFS approach to begin with, and then it's EMDR on the back burner. We won't probably know those answers for probably 10 years.
Yeah.
And we're just going to be playing around with it in the meantime. But we need to continue to have these conversations. And I think there's also space at some point to have the deeper theological question of, man, for two Christians, like, what is going on here? Like, why is God allowing this to take place? Not that I'm arguing it, not that I'm against it. By no means am I against it. It's more of like a curiosity of, like, kind of like the Matrix with Neo, like seeing the mirror move, and like I see what's happening, and like I want to touch it, but I want everybody else to touch it and explore it as well, because the implications of this, I mean, we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg potentially here.
Right.
Anything you want to add? I'm not by no means wrapping up, but just when we took that short break, I was just thinking, you know, like these are the conversations that need to get out there, need to be discussed.
Right. No, I agree with you completely on that. I think the biggest thing for me is, you know, when I look at plant medicine, I think of it as like God put these plants on this earth for a reason. And who is a human to tell me what is good for me and what is not good for me outside of what I experience? And so, you know, if we go to any of these Western medicine doctors, they're, you know, are probably more than likely not going to be on board with this because there is no evidence. There is nothing showing that it's working. But when you have someone like me who, you know, was significantly injured before this medicine, and I, you know, I did all the work, and like that, you know, people have asked me, well, was it psychological or was it physiological? And I've wrestled with that question myself. Was it psychological or was it physiological? I lean more towards it was not psychological because I pushed myself. I would deny the fact that it was happening in my body, even if it was happening. Like I
Right.
tried to override that system. A lot of people don't do that. And that's when I think you can ask that question a little bit more, I don't know, to that person, if they're not trying, is it psychological or is it physiological? But here I was trying so hard to overcome these physical ailments. I could not get there. And I went to the medicine and I was like, hey, God, like, you know, through this medicine, if you can heal me, heal me. And, you know, there's a part of me that's like, man, why did I need medicine to be able to believe he could do that? But I did. Like, I did not think that, you know, that I could be healed. There was something blocking that in me. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, but to counteract that, I mean, we accept that if I snap a bone, that I need to go get it set, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the hard, yeah. You could go, you know, the hard line, super independent, you know, Christian, and say like, well, you know, you snapped your bone. If you had enough faith that God can heal it, which obviously we believe he can, then he'll heal it. When we've been given modern medicine and we know what actually works, you got to go to get a doctor, you got to get it set, you got to put it in a cast, boom, 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 boom. So yes and no. I mean, with that argument for sure. I think if anything, because it's new, that's the knee jerk reaction.
Yes.
Is like, well, if you had enough faith, like God will heal you. And it's like, no.
Yeah. But what's interesting is like, I do fully have that faith now. Like, I'm not saying I wouldn't go to a doctor. Like, I'm going to try to do everything I can on my own before I go to a doctor for something super invasive, right? Like,
sure.
But I do feel like through prayer and through meditation, like I could grasp that now without the use of medicine. Like I do fully believe that I could allow him in to do healing now without the use of medicine.
For you as a Christian, and this is something I've talked with clients, different clients have dealt with, for you as a Christian, right? So just to paint the stage, specifically with ayahuasca, but some with ibogaine, there have been indigenous people, specifically with ayahuasca in South America, Central America, that have used this as a ceremonial tool for healing, for rituals, what have you. And so Western individuals have gone down, taken ayahuasca, learned from shamans, and then brought back basically, hey, what worked down here? And now we're going to do the same thing with the music, with the drums, with the whole ceremony bit, right? Mm-hmm. And so in some instances, and, you know, I've had clients go for a variety of different organizations and platforms for delivery methods, but I've had some people that were Christians go and say like, this was like way more new agey, and I just had to ignore it to get to the medicine, because I believe that God ultimately, like yourself, is in the medicine, or it's a portal, however you want to describe it. My question to you is, for you going through Ambio, and this isn't a knock on Ambio or celebrate Ambio, but for you, was there anything in there that was like, I feel like that there's, you're pushing me one way or the other when it comes to a belief system? Because this is one of the things you and I have talked about, but I'm pretty vocal about, like, just because we take everything that happened in South America, if we begin to introduce that in a clinical way, well, now we're actually ethically in a really bad spot, because we're imposing a belief system also to a group of individuals that are highly traumatic, also under the influence of drugs, as opposed to, hey, we could take what is actually the medicine and use it in their faith system to get the most bang for their buck, and also ethically, if we were doing it in a clinical realm. Now, I understand this is probably done in Mexico, but I'm just curious for you, was there any push either way?
Yeah, no, I think Ambio does a really good job. Like they pray before every meal that
Cool.
you have, and they just let you know, like, you pray to the God that you serve.
Okay.
And they're very, like, vocal about that. There's not one way or the other. And even in my entire medicine journey, you do, like, the sweat lodge, and there's a lot of, like, spiritual background in all of that work, sacral background, and really, just looking at it from the perspective of this medicine is sacred. However you want to look at that, like, how, you can have 50 different beliefs about how that medicine is sacred, but in the end, the medicine is sacred. And it was put here through your belief system. And, that's what helped me get through. Like, if there's, speaking of something and I'm like, I don't really agree, or I don't understand it, I'm doing it from the perspective of, the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And
he made the plant, he put it here, and, this is just the vehicle in which I'm taking it.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And I've heard, I've never asked somebody directly about Ambio. And so that's awesome to hear, because the more, I think, look, it's a refinement process, just like you and I as clinicians are figuring out what works, what doesn't work. I think, going back to 2018 when my first client went through, and some of the other ones that went in the early 2020 era, those were some of the feedback I was getting. And so the more conversations I had, I was trying to be as vocal as possible with different organizations that we work with, whatnot, of like, hey, like, let's try and keep it as neutral as possible, or to your point, like what Ambio is doing. Because at the end of the day, if we want the Mormon housewife that was raped at 16, or the Catholic whomever, to eventually buy in and use psychedelics for their own healing or therapeutic process, it's got to be client-centered, client-led, especially with their faith systems as well.
Correct. Yeah.
So 3 months in, or 4 months, right? Almost 4 months.
3 months.
3 months in, what's it been like? I'm curious, somebody that's so close to you, like your husband, like, is he, or are you guys kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, or like, I mean, what's his experience of all of this?
So it's very interesting. Before I left, he was, like, not necessarily on board with Ibogaine. Not that he wasn't like, hey, I don't want you to go, but I think he was very skeptical. I don't think that he thought it was going to work. And then I got back and he was like, I want to go. Immediately he was like, I want to go. And that, even I remember even texting him from Ambio. They do take your phone right before you take the Ibogaine, but you have your phone up until that point. And
they don't want you live streaming.
Yeah, but you don't want your phone on that grade A, promise me. Or I promise you do not want your phone. Like, if people were texting during that day, no one would go get Ibogaine. But no, so I remember texting him, and I can't remember exactly what the message was, but he said he wished that he could do something. And I was like, well, I know how you could do that. I was not meaning, like, to take Ibogaine, but he interpreted it that way. And he was like, I'm not taking Ibogaine. Like, and that was while I was at Ambio, before I came back. So to see that drastic shift in him just shows you like what it did for me.
Yeah.
You know, and I can be more interactive with the family. I can do more things. You know, my kids, they're young, but my youngest is 8 and my middle son is 11. And there are so many times that they would say, you know, mom's just lazy. They don't understand. They don't get it. Right. But to have them have me back and not be, you know, quote unquote lazy to them is just it is a miracle.
That's awesome. I think we were talking before we hit record. Did you have you had a follow-up MRI or any scans done on your back?
Yeah, so I just had an MRI done about a week ago. I don't have the results, the image results. I have the report right up. But what is so interesting is after my surgeries, I was diagnosed with a condition called adhesive arachnoiditis. And it is where your nerves are bundled up and there's so much scar tissue. And they're like glued together. And so there's a lot of nerve damage and they're glued together. It causes a lot of pain. It would cause like burning, prickly sensations in my legs and on the bottom of my feet. It's very, very painful. They say it's like one of the like worst conditions you could have. And my most recent MRI shows that those bundle of nerves are unremarkable, meaning normal. And this is a condition that there is no cure for.
That's amazing.
Nothing has been able to reverse the damage, you know, and so it will be very interesting for me to get the images and see the difference. Now, I will say, it's just because I'm going to play devil's advocate, like it can depend on the radiologist who's reading the report, you know, the images, like there's a lot of nuance there, but I've never had an MRI say that before. So it's very interesting to me to see that that is so significantly different.
When do you know when you'll get the actual images or when they'll get the images and is there a report that comes with it?
Yeah, so I have the report. I just don't have the images. I need to go get the images. And then what I'm going to do is actually send it to the doctor who he didn't initially diagnose me with the adhesive arachnoiditis. It was a second opinion that I got about it.
Okay.
And I want him to compare the two and I want to see what he says.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're everybody that's doing this, and you know, full disclosure for the people that you know, this is a spectrum of individuals out here, right? There's people that are like, this is the latest and greatest thing since sliced bread, and there's people that are like, this is a dog and pony show or a snake oil salesman, and all this has come crashing down. Regardless of where you're at on that, we're in this test phase, right? Where everybody that's going through still is somewhat of a test monkey. I would argue, you know, in the grand scheme of things. Now, people that are like, no, there's research going back to the 60s and 70s. Like, I get all that, but to where mainstream academia is, and we've got credible studies that show time and time again, hey, there's physiological healing properties that are taking place here. We're not there yet. We're just getting started, but yeah, for people that are in immense pain and literally tried everything, how many surgeries? 3, 4, you said, back surgeries, to get to a point where they say, hey, this is inoperable pretty much unless your life is threatened, like we're not going in there again. And then to go and do something psychological, that there very well could be, at least on your report, physiological healing, like this is incredible, like absolutely incredible. It's so cool. I can't understate it enough. And just want to highlight, this is, you know, one of the most interesting, if it continues to develop, it'll be one of the most interesting discoveries within our field. And it's not a discovery, it's old, but like implementations in our field, maybe ever.
Yeah.
And the fact that the special operations community has brought it to the masses and we've got a front row seat, and you quite literally, you know, who knows if you hadn't started working with the special operations community, like you're still, you know, suffering right now. I mean, that right there, right, is worth the price of admission. Just thinking about it, it's making me emotional because, I know your life has changed.
Yeah.
And even if it's just for the last 3 months, like that you've been given 3 months that you haven't had in how many years?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I mean, that's what I keep telling myself. Like, I don't even care if this is not permanent. I just got 3 months of my life back that I have not had in over 5 years. I mean, even before that surgery, because I was in pain because of the herniation. But yeah, this last 3 months is worth it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the physiological scans of individuals like yourself and others, it'll be really interesting. Now, obviously, I would assume just quarterbacking it through that the medicine is allowing, to your point, something happening psychologically that is then allowing the physiological healing to take place, right?
Yeah.
Some sort of like barriers or mental blocks that, hey, in this process, you're all of those safeguards, if you will. I'm thinking about like a computer and software. All those firewalls are brought down.
Yeah.
And maybe a fuller presence of God takes place. And I know some people that are probably hearing that or hear that are like, well, like we have the fullness of God. Absolutely, we do. In the Christian realm, we believe that, but at the same time, we also are incredibly broken individuals and can have broken pieces as well. And so, again, I'm so glad to have brought you on, Stacy, because I know personally I'm going to send this to a bunch of individuals that I went to seminary with and get their opinion on all of this and just their feedback. But it's something that's going to create, hopefully, lots of conversations. And I think the more individuals that can hear about this, talk about this, hear a credible individual that, had this experience, like, super blessed to have you on today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to share my story. I'm happy to be living this story. So, yeah, I do hope that we see more Christians like consider this, as an option for themselves or for other people. And I think, I don't know if we touched on it enough. You did mention it quite a few times, but yeah, I have seen people that go in and are, not necessarily atheists, but have lost their faith in God and come out and say, wow, like, I know there is a God. And for something to do that, you have to think, why did God put it on this earth? Like, it has to make sense. Like, God put it there for that reason. And, we as humans have just blocked that access, or whatever it might be. I have no doubt that God has that here for that reason. Now, again, I want to say, do we have to do it in the way that we're doing it? I don't know. Right? Like,
that's the thing. There's so
much research that needs to be
so many
done.
unknown questions at this point.
Right. Like, do we need to do it in so impactfully that we have these hallucinogenic effects from it? I don't know, but that's what worked for me. But maybe we can scale it down and give someone like a pill of this every day, and they can see the same results where they're not being altered by the medicine and by any means. It's just very therapeutic medicine.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, this is, and obviously I've been chewing this for almost 10 years. This is the thing that I think individuals need to understand. So there's so many veins of conversation and research that have yet to be done. So, like, does the medicine even do anything, right? Obvious current research is looking into that. Then what does it do psychologically? How does it help us? We've talked about that a little bit as clinicians and what we can do, can't do. We don't know how long it lasts, or at least, the biggest bang for the buck. Lindsay, in all of her estimates, is said, I think, about 4 to 6 weeks. What is the best evidence-based approach to use with it as far as a pre-therapy and a post-therapy? We have no idea. Okay. Ethically, how do we deliver it ethically without infusing worldviews like I just talked about? But then if you even step into a worldview like Christianity, like you and I discussed, okay, what does that mean? And how do we fit this into our biblical context? Like, is there room for that? What kind of things are we butting up against? I mean, on and on and on. There's so many avenues of conversation that this whole field is opening up. And I want to continue to open them and broaden them, at least within Soft Network and within our networks, because at the end of the day, the more conversations happen, we are not the smartest people, but the more that we can get these conversations rolling, the more aspects that individuals that maybe are a little bit sharper can speak into them. And just like research, this conversation builds and builds and builds. So I know you got to go. I got to go here in a second. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess maybe just for like the Christian perspective, but also anyone else. Like, really, I think for me is I came out of this knowing that the medicine just opened the door, but my faith is what got me what I desired. And I think that everyone kind of needs to maybe take on that idea when they're if they're considering plant medicine, is like, it is not the medicine itself. While it may have very therapeutic properties, I think your surrender and your faith in what could happen is what really makes the change. And that's evidenced by afterwards, right? Like, after you do this plant medicine, if you don't have that faith and that desire to continue, you can lose what the medicine provides for you. You can go back to old habits. So even in the medicine and after the medicine, that faith and that belief within yourself and maybe a higher power, or even the medicine, I guess, is what brings you through.
Great point. Great point. I will definitely make sure to add your practice website, or at least if anybody's looking for information on how to work with Stacy. Stacy, you're licensed in Colorado, North Carolina, Florida, Alabama?
Alabama. Yep.
Okay. Works telehealth, obviously. And then you do have an office in Fort Walton Beach, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Anything else you want to say or share before we wrap up?
No, I just really appreciate this opportunity, Chris.
Well, hey, no, we have, thank you. We're honored. Like, at the end of the day, this is your story. And so kudos to you as a clinician. Like, for any clinician that gets to watch this, like, this is another clinician that, hey, is still working on themselves. I tell my students all the time, like, you should never stop working on your own story, because it'll make you a better clinician. But, to take that dive, but then also to come on here and share your story, because I'm sure at some point, maybe, whether it's family members or clients will see your story. Like, thank you for being vulnerable and coming in here and sharing like everything that's happened, because it's pretty profound.
Of course, I'm honored. I would be doing God a disservice if I didn't. So
that's awesome. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. And please share this content with your networks.